Salutations, gang! Nate on the Stone here. Welcome back to my channel. It is good to be back here. If you were wondering where I've been for the last couple of weeks, well, truth be told, your boy was actually back in YouTube jail again. And not disappointingly enough for anything that I have recently said. I think that if you're going to be thrown into YouTube jail or Twitter jail or anything like that, then it should be for something that you've said within, the proximate past. I think it shouldn't be for something that you said over a year ago, which is actually what happened. YouTube finally found a video that we actually did on the 57th edition of the Rolling Stone, as a matter of fact, that I did over a year ago, okay, about a topic that I probably can't even mention anymore without getting thrown right back into the YouTube can. Suffice it to say, to give you guys a hint about what it was about, it was a video concerning a specific drug whose name begins with an H and has hydroxychloroquine in it. Okay, I know that those are very vague clues, but put on your thinking caps and you'll be able to figure it out. I've got faith in you all. So anyway, yes, for a video that was actually put up over a year ago, YouTube finally just found it, and because of that, I was thrown into YouTube prison again. Appealed the decision, and it didn't do any good. Even though I stand by what I said in my appeal, okay? So we have this this drug that was being touted as a means of combating a specific virus that has caused most of the world to lock down because this virus got out of control and became an actual pandemic. And scientists did not have a clear consensus on it. Different scientists said different things. And in fact, there was a whole study done in India concerning this specific thing, this specific drug that was contemplating being used against this specific virological threat. And it was the opinion of many Indian doctors, Indian physicians, that it was actually a great way of combating this particular virus. So it raises the question, does scientific research, scientific discovery, scientific opinion that happens outside of Western nations and which contradicts organizations like the World Health Organization, is that automatically taken as subpar by the likes of YouTube? And in that case, is this another manifestation of white supremacy, white fragility, and the like? I also just have to mention, I am so getting thrown back into jail for this. If this video is taken down, and if you don't see me making videos again for another couple of weeks, it's because they've thrown me right back into jail. But it also offends me, I think, gang, because not only are the topics up for discussion being arbitrarily narrowed further and further down by the likes of YouTube, Facebook, and the other social media technocrats, but not only that would be bad enough, but the incompetence of it is the cherry on top that just makes me want to throw myself over the nearest cliff. Okay? If you're an evil, completely corrupt, totalitarian-esque system, okay, everyone's got to have a hobby. But at least be competent about it. Don't wait over a year until you're finally going through all the old videos and being, oh, look, this guy slipped through the net. Quick, take it down and banish him into the dungeon for a week to teach him a lesson. Just at least do it competently, YouTube. Do it competently at least. And with that, I think I probably signed my own warrant, again, for my rearrest and my exile from this platform. But you know what, gang? To be perfectly honest, I'm getting kind of fed up with YouTube. But we'll talk about that at some point in the future. Let us dive right into it, because in my absence, of course, gang, the world has crumbled at even a more drastic rate than anyone would have really thought, which kind of surprises me, and then I slap myself in the face and say, bozo, you shouldn't be surprised at anything anymore. Nothing should surprise you. You should give up being surprised. It's an occupational hazard, as Batman says to Star Sapphire, I think, in an episode of Beware the Batman. Criminally underrated show, by the way. So, first story of this week concerns the literal end to any vestige, any remaining illusion that we had, that we actually lived in a republic, that we actually had self-government, that we were in fact a self-governing people. And the thing that started this whole thing, gang, happened in Texas. The Texas legislature was poised, actually, to pass a Voter Integrity Act, as many other states have taken up and many other states have actually done. And you know the drill. It was going to require people to actually present valid state-authorized ID in order to actually cast a vote. It was going to reform mail-in ballots, the usual things. Which of course means that the reaction on the American left was that, my God, Greg Abbott might as well have come to work wearing a Klansman hood, because as we all know, these things are only done in order to prevent poor people, i.e. minorities, to vote. Which actually, I found a statistic this past week that was actually interesting, which relates to this. We always hear that these bills are meant to suppress minority votes because the minority people are more oftentimes poorer than white Americans, and therefore they're not going to have the money to buy a state-sanctioned ID, even though most of these bills say that, if you don't have, for some reason, a driver's license, if you don't have your birth certificate or anything like that, just go on the government's website and fill out a particular form, and they will send you one for free. Won't cost you a cent. You don't even have to send in your the usual 25 cents in a box top for a Cracker Jack prize that you would have to do like in the 70s or the 80s or anything like that. So that's the narrative on the left. Interestingly enough, the statistic that I found is that 19% of Black Americans, I don't know what the percentage is for Hispanic Americans, but 19% of Black Americans are officially in poverty, which is about double the number for white Americans. And people might say, oh my gosh, that's terrible, that's horrible. But here's the thing. Even at 19% of Black Americans being in poverty, that still means that 8 out of 10 African Americans, 8 out of every 10 African Americans are at the very least middle class, okay? They are not in poverty. They do not meet the definition, the federal definition of poverty. So, even if these bills were construed in such a way so as to prevent poor people, and therefore minorities, poor people, let's just say, to vote, it wouldn't keep most minorities away from the polls because, most people who belong to some sort of ethnic minority are not in poverty. There is the actual one of the startling things that you might hear this week, because you'd never hear of that from any of the usual sources of information. But anyway, the Texas legislature was all set to pass this bill. And this is where we get devious, gang, because the Democrats in both the Texas State House and the Texas State Senate knew that they did not have enough members in either house, in either chamber of the state legislature to actually stop this bill. Even if they all voted to a man no on the bill, it was going to pass, and it was going to pass very easily. So what did these Texas Democrat lawmakers, and I made those air quotes for a reason, do? They chartered 2 private jets, and they flew without masks. I will say they flew without masks to Washington, D.C., which is actually where they still are as of this recording. And the reason why they flew to Washington, D.C. on their chartered private jets, in case you're wondering, is because by leaving the state, they actually denied the Texas State House of Representatives a quorum, which is the minimum amount of legislators needed for the chamber to actually do business, vote on laws, etc., etc. Meaning that basically the Texas legislature is at a standstill. Now, there weren't enough members, Democrat members of the Texas Senate to actually pull this stunt off. The Senate actually still has a quorum down in Texas, and they passed this bill, but they haven't passed it in the House. And so just like at the federal level, both houses need to vote for it. Both chambers of the legislature need to vote for it before it can go to the governor's desk, and then the governor will either sign it and it becomes state law, or he'll veto it, at which point, it'll go back to the legislature. So this is what has happened. And this is, as many people on Twitter and other social media platforms are pointing out, is completely new territory. As far as I know, gang, and as far as I think these people knew, this has never been done before. You have never had the entire minority party in a state legislature, in both chambers, just flee the state in order to make everything grind to a halt so that a particular piece of legislation that they opposed would not get passed. Now, of course, the Democrats, and I shouldn't even say that, but the American left is portraying these people as heroes. In fact, they had a huge powwow in Washington, D.C. after their private jets landed, where they, again maskless, started singing "We Shall Overcome," which is, I believe, I know that it is an African-American spiritual song, a hymn, I believe. I don't know when exactly it was composed, but I believe that it has become associated with the civil rights movement. So, of course, they, mythologically speaking, are trying to attach themselves to Martin Luther King Jr. and all of those people by committing a dereliction of duty. And this is where I say that we have completely lost the last illusion that we have self-government game. Because think about it in the context of this, okay? We vote not just for congressmen and senators at the federal level, but we vote for state representatives for the state houses and our state senates, unless of course you live in Nebraska, which is the only state that has a unicameral system. But we vote for state representatives to do the same thing that the federal representatives do, to represent us. We send them to the state capitol in our place so that we don't have to actually go there in mass and debate bills, scream, yell at each other, and vote up or down on these things, right? That's what republicanism is. That's one of its essences, politically speaking. The people send representatives who stand in for them to do the government's business, to do the people's business. It's our government. We just do everything in a sense by proxy through representatives and governors, etc., etc. And it didn't matter in the past whether the members of a minority party or whether a group of people, a minority group within the legislature composed of people from both parties or different parties, knew that they couldn't stop a bill that they opposed. They stayed and they voted no on it. They did their duty and they voted no on it. And then, of course, the bill was passed, and then they said, okay, what's the next step? How can we actually, stop this in other ways? Can we take this to court? Can we campaign on this issue so that we can become a majority in the legislature and get the governorship so then we can reverse this decision, etc. That's how the game was played now. But now, because of what these Texas Democrat legislators did, these oath breakers, I would call them, they're not lawmakers, they're law breakers, because they fled the state, and therefore they were not there to actually represent their constituents during this time. In fact, they're still not representing their constituents. They're living the high life in D.C. So, what this means now, especially in our politically charged, and not politically charged isn't even the right word anymore today, gang, our politically frenzied culture where everything is reduced to the bifurcation of politics and ideology. What this means now that the Texas Democrats have gotten away with it, this is going to be normalized. You are going to see Democrat minorities in every state where they do not have control of the legislature do the exact same thing, because now this has been made a legitimate option for them. Just like last year when we had BLM and Antifa rioting, looting, burning, pillaging, vandalizing and everything. That was legitimate for them. That normalized those sorts of activities as political activities, again, for them. You get a little rambunctious at the Capitol. The other side gets a little rambunctious at the Capitol on a particular date, and my God, it's the worst thing since the burning of the White House in 1812. So again, different rules depending on which side of the ideological divide you fall on. So, in the same way, now that these Texas legislators have gotten away with it, every Democrat minority in every state legislature is going to pull off the same trick, or they're going to try. And if they aren't stopped immediately, every time they successfully pull this off, they're only going to become bolder and bolder and bolder and bolder. Now, why does this get rid of the last vestige of self-government? The last illusion of self-government, gang? Well, it's because of this. Legally speaking, again, a legislature needs a quorum, the lowest number of representatives possible in order to actually do business. Well, if the minority party can actually deprive the legislature or one particular chamber in the legislature of a quorum and simply flee the state, fly on private jets to, Los Angeles or Washington, D.C. or New York City or whatnot, then they have the power to cause everything to come to a standstill in your state capital whenever they want. And worse than that, okay, get ready for this. They then hold all the cards. Because legally speaking, the legislative can't do anything. The legislature can't do anything until they actually get that quorum, until those people come back. So then they are in the position of power. The representatives, the state reps, the lawbreakers who fled the state. They have all the power because they can turn around and say to the remnant of the legislature, to the governor, oh, okay, you want us to come back so that, we can actually keep working like people sent us to the state capitol to do? Okay, here's our list of demands. Agree to them, or we're going to keep sitting here drinking tequila or Manhattans or whatever they're swilling down in Martha's Vineyard. And so there you go. Think of it like this, gang. When your government, okay, because again, all of this, in theory, I know that it's horribly corrupt, but in theory, everything that happens in the state capitol is our business because everything only happens by proxy. These legislators, they're only there because we hired them. We sent them to represent us. That is their job. That's why we call them public servants. So when our state governments, which are actually supposed to represent us on a much deeper and better level than what happens on Capitol Hill, when that can be neutralized completely and utterly with a snap of the finger at any time, at the drop of a nickel, you don't have self-government. That is the textbook definition of tyranny by the minority. There you go. That is what it is. There is no other word for it. Because that minority can decide to pull up stakes and leave for any reason it wants. And this is why, gang, I say that Governor Greg Abbott of Texas made a huge mistake when he allowed these wankers to actually abscond to Washington, D.C. on their private jets. Now, he has since tried to backpedal, and he has promised that they're all going to be arrested as soon as they set foot on Texas soil again. First of all, that implies that they actually will step foot in Texas again. We have no guarantee now. We are in completely uncharted territory here. Second, even if they return to Texas, and even if Abbott actually stays true to his word and does arrest them, the narrative will have been set. The lawbreakers who fled will be the heroes. Again, they've clothed themselves in the cloaks of MLK and Malcolm X and all of those civil rights figures, right? So when Abbott arrests them, it's going to be, oh my gosh, it's like Selma, it's just like the civil rights movement all over again when, who was that governor of Louisiana, or was it Alabama? I forget. Bull Connor, turned on the fire hydrant hoses on the black protesters and the peaceful black marchers. It's just like that, the exact same thing. And of course, that will be magnified by the press and by the entertainment people and on the Capitol Hill and everything, because again, they've got the bully pulpit of the presidency and the speakership and the Senate majority and all of that. And so the opportunity will have been lost. And I don't know if Abbott actually has the political courage to do that. It would take an extraordinary amount of political courage for anyone to do that. So I'm not just singling him out. What should have been done is that those people should have been arrested before they even got on their private jets. Because, this was planned. I was getting notifications on my phone saying, oh my gosh, the Texas Democrat lawmakers are all planning to leave the state in protest of this voter bill. So everyone knew it. That's when they should have been arrested, to nip this in the bud before they stole the last vestiges of self-government that you guys have. Because that's who this affects. You. You don't have self-government anymore. You only have a government now that is run and controlled by leftist, fire-breathing imams. Basically, they're the equivalent of the imams in Iran. Now, just really quickly, if I were Greg Abbott, because people might be saying, Nate, what's your solution? Well, besides from what I just said, which again isn't really a solution because it needed to be done in the past. If I were Abbott, if I was in any sort of leadership in the Texas legislature, I would say, okay, guys, since you fled the state, that must mean that you oppose this bill. Therefore, your votes are going to be marked in the record as no on this bill. We are going to vote for this bill. Again, the Senate already has passed it. It's up to the House now. The rest of the House is going to vote on it. It will be passed more than likely, and then the governor will sign it, and it's going to go into effect. We're just going to take your act of fleeing the state to leave, to abdicate your responsibility and your duty as state representatives. We're going to take that as a no vote. And then we're going to vote, and we're going to pass the bill anyway. And when it inevitably happens that the state is sued because of this move, and when it inevitably happens that some pointy-headed judge rules against the state and says that, the law is completely null and void because you did it, you passed it without a quorum actually being there in the building, then every single man in the executive and legislative branch of Texas who is actually sane and who has the good of the people forefront in his mind should tell that judge, well, that's a very nice ruling. Now enforce it. And then they should turn around and they should make it clear to every single election official across the length and breadth of Texas that this law is enforceable, that it is actually on the books still, and that if they don't follow it, they're going to be hauled off to jail in handcuffs. And I know that this is, oh my gosh, Nathan, this sounds, very... This sounds strict. This sounds harsh. This almost sounds like black shirt stuff. No, it's not, gang. It's not black shirt stuff at all. This is a legitimate reaction to what the left has done, because we have finally reached the point where, I'm just going to say it, we have finally reached the point where the only way to actually push back against the garbage that the left flings at us every single day is to actually put a little muscle behind our rhetoric and punch them in the nose. That is the point we have reached. That's what needs to happen, and that is story number one.